This morning is September 6th. It is the first Sunday in September, and that means that we made it through August. As a church, as a community, as a nation, and as the human race, we have successfully completed one more month in the unending ridiculousness that history will remember as the year 2020. Man, what a year, right? Remember back in January when Australia was on fire? And we all thought, well, this is going to be like the defining thing of 2020. How little we knew. But that seems like a million years ago. I'm not going to rehash the whole list of things that are terrible about the year 2020, except to say that the first 8 months of 2020 felt like they took about 8 years. And we still have 4 months to go. Now, the most recent thing to go haywire, for me at least, was on Friday evening. My band, Blue Sky Falls, we recorded a whole worship set to play for the service this morning. 5 songs. And we sounded really good, I gotta tell you. It was a really good set. But something went sideways with the recording, and we ended up without any usable audio. We have 7 camera angles that look fantastic, but nothing that would sound good to go with it. And it was already Friday night when I discovered that we hadn't captured the audio. So it was really too late for me to pivot to plan C, because my band was already plan B. So that's why the music you saw this morning could be described as either like a greatest hits episode or a flashback episode, because I didn't have time to do anything new. And that's not how I wanted to kick things off for the new sermon series we're starting today. It's called One Another, and it is about, it's about how we treat one another. The Bible has a lot to say about how we treat each other, because how we treat each other is really, really important. It's important because each of us matters to God. And so each of us should matter to one another, because what matters to God should matter to us. But it's also important because the way we treat each other, that shows the world what matters to us. It shows the world what matters to the church, what kind of people we are, and what we're inviting them into when we share Jesus with them. There's a story that I heard. I don't think it's true, but it's a good story, so I'm going to share it, where a busy father was trying to keep his young daughter occupied so that he could get some work done. I don't know if any of you can relate to a situation like this. And he finally grabbed a magazine, and he found a picture of a world map. And he pulled it out of the magazine, and he cut it into many pieces. And he gave her the pieces, and he said, here's a puzzle. Can you put the puzzle together so Daddy can get some work done? Figuring this would take her a while. And it took her about 3 minutes. And he said, how did you get this done so fast? She said, on the back, on the other side of the page, there was a picture of a church. So it was really easy. If you put the church back together, the world comes into place. Like I said, I don't think it's true, but it's a really good story. So it's important the way we treat each other. And especially as more and more churches are beginning to reopen again after the world ended, I think we have a chance to kind of start over, to reboot ourselves, to look at the things we do and how we treat each other. So as I sat down to get the first message in this series started, I had 2 things on my mind. First, really can't escape the weirdness of 2020. And second, with the reused music segments this morning, I got to thinking about flashbacks. You know, you're watching a TV show or a movie and the screen goes all squiggly on the sides, or all of a sudden the picture's black and white or sepia toned, and you know you're about to see some history. You're either going to see something you've seen before that's about to become important to the current story, or you're going to see some new information being introduced that provides more context to the current story. So we're going to have a flashback episode this morning for the whole service. We already started with the music, so we might as well go all in. And as I thought back through the years that I remember well, I found one year that can really reinforce the lessons from the text this morning. Specifically, I found 4 songs from a specific year that I think can help us. So our 4 points this morning are all going to be titles of songs that were released that year. These are the things I do to entertain myself when I'm left to my own devices. But I'm not going to tell you what year it was. I want to see if you guys can guess what year we're going to be talking about. I'm going to list some major events that happened during the year in question, and when you think you've figured it out, shout it out. This was the year that Prince Charles and Princess Diana officially divorced. No guesses yet. Okay. This was the year that NASA launched the Mars Global Surveyor. This was the year that mad cow disease hit the United Kingdom. Remember we thought that was like a serious sickness? If only we had known. This was the year that Microsoft released Windows NT version 4. This was the year that Dolly the sheep became the first animal to be successfully cloned. Any guesses yet? I see the wheels turning. What? 94? Close. This was the year that the first Mission Impossible movie with Tom Cruise came out. This was the year that Tickle Me Elmo came on the market. 97? Close. This was the year, I learned this one. This was the year that a blizzard in Allentown, Pennsylvania stranded the basketball team Orlando Magic, the shock rocker Marilyn Manson, and the cast of Sesame Street Live together in one hotel. And, you know, I think back of all the events I've missed in my life, and I really wish I'd been there for that, because that sounds awesome. This was the year that Atari shut down. And the 4 most popular TV shows that year were ER, Seinfeld, Suddenly Susan, and Friends. The year was 1996. I was 23 years old. Jen and I celebrated our 2nd wedding anniversary, and the decade with the best music in history was beginning its 2nd but lesser half. See, I love 90s music, and I will go to bat for 90s alternative, grunge, post-grunge, and power pop as the best music that has ever come out of a radio. In fact, Brian and Kim can attest to this. I recently got in an argument with Pastor Tim about this, about the greatness of 90s rock music. And he told me that if he had known ahead of time that I was a Weezer fan, that he wouldn't have hired me. So, joke's on him, I guess. Anyway, we are going to start this morning with the book of Romans. Romans is an interesting book because it's not like a lot of Paul's other writings. Most of Paul's letters are either written to a church that he started, like in 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and he's trying to address issues that they were going through or problems that he's hearing about. Or they were letters to specific people about specific situations, like Philemon or Timothy. But Romans is different because Paul had not yet been to Rome. So he wasn't checking in on them or correcting a church that he had planted. He was actually preparing them for a visit because he wanted to go to Rome. Now, he eventually did get to Rome, but that is a very long and very sad story for another day. He was writing to the Roman church to say, hey, I've heard good things about you, and I'd love to come and spend some time with you. And he was also planning a little fundraiser for his trip to Spain. Missions fundraising goes back a very long time. And this book is filled with the message of the gospel. We're going to skip ahead to Romans chapter 12 this morning, to verses 9 through 16. And these verses are going to kind of form our thesis statement for this One Another series. There's a lot in these few verses about how we should treat each other. This morning I want to focus on 4 specific things that we need to do in the way we treat each other, all through song titles from 1996. So let's read Romans 12, 9 to 16, and then we're going to dig a little bit deeper. Don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. Hate what is wrong. Hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. Never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. Rejoice in our confident hope. Be patient in trouble and keep on praying. When God's people are in need, be ready to help them. Always be eager to practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Don't curse them. Pray that God will bless them. Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. That's 8 verses and almost too many lessons to count. Most of these verses could be a whole sermon in and of themselves. There is so much good stuff in here. Be real, be kind, be hopeful, be diligent, be patient, be humble, be loving. But in the context of how we treat each other in the church, what does all of this look like? Well, if we go back in Romans 12 just a bit, we can start to see some more hints. Up in verse 2, Paul writes this: "Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." Now, I remember the word change coming up a lot in 1996, especially toward the end of summer, beginning of fall, in the run-up to the presidential election that year. But we're not talking about political change. We're talking about changing your mind and changing your heart. Changing them away from what the world says is normal and right and good. Other translations say, do not be conformed to the ways of this world. The world is not where we're supposed to be getting the model for our behavior. The world is not where we're supposed to be getting the model for our standards or the model for how we treat each other. That model is only found in Jesus. The world teaches us to look out for number one. Jesus teaches us to put others first. The world teaches us that we have rights. Jesus teaches us that we should forfeit them. The world teaches us that we should defend ourselves and our property. Jesus teaches us that if someone takes your coat, you should give them your shirt too. We shouldn't be acting like the world. We should be acting like Jesus. But I gotta be honest, I see very recently more and more church leaders falling and being destroyed because they were acting like the world. Just in the past month, several high-profile Christian leaders have been wrapped up in scandals. I'm not going to mention their names. You can search and find the articles and read them for yourselves easily enough. But every time that happens, it damages the church. Now, Paul's point here is that we have to stop modeling our behaviors after the world's example. Or, as Sheryl Crow would have put it in 1996, a change would do you good. So don't keep on following the world. Don't keep on doing the things that the world does and wanting the things that the world wants. Be more like Jesus. A change would do you good. And aside from changing ourselves not to be like the world, what else can we do to make sure we're treating each other the way that we should? Well, we can take another piece of advice from the book of James. In James chapter 1, verse 19, he says, "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry." Let's take a survey. You guys know I love surveys. I want you to raise your hand if you have ever gotten angry. Okay, a couple of you are lying. That's fine. Keep your hand up if you've ever spoken harsh words in that anger. Keep your hand up if you've ever said harsh words that you regretted in your anger. You put your hands down. There's an old cliche that I really did not want to trot out this morning, but a lot of cliches are cliches because there's truth that you can learn from them. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, because it's twice as important to listen as it is to talk. I'm sure you've heard that one. I don't think it's literally true, because I'm pretty sure God gave us 2 ears to process stereo sounds, to give ourselves a sense of space and distance. That doesn't matter. The point is true. Listening is so much more important than speaking. There's another great saying about keeping your mouth shut, and it goes like this: better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and to remove all doubt. Now, I have attributed that quote to Abraham Twain, because some people think Abraham Lincoln said it, some people think Mark Twain said it. There's no proof for either one. And in fact, in reality, I think the most likely source for this quote is King Solomon. Because Proverbs 17:28 says, "Even fools are thought wise when they keep silent. With their mouths shut, they seem intelligent." And I'm going to be honest, that line of thinking has served me really well over the years. A younger version of Brad was quicker to speak and almost always quicker to anger or argument or judgment. But I've learned through sometimes very difficult lessons that silence is very often the wisest reply, especially in a heated moment. Or, as the ska punk band No Doubt would have put it in 1996, don't speak. The speaking is not a sin. Being angry is not a sin. Even Jesus got angry. But as Paul wrote in Ephesians 4, don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. The anger isn't the sin. The sin is in letting it take over. The speaking isn't the sin. The sin is in speaking too quickly, too harshly, and not speaking in love. But man, sometimes, I don't know if you've experienced this, sometimes it is really, really hard to stay quiet. Really hard. Like, there are those times when you're in an argument with somebody and you are so right, but you just can't say anything. It's a lesson that I learned by doing years in tech support. It didn't take me long to realize that listening was better than responding too quickly. To realize that basically letting whoever's having the problem, letting them continue to believe that computers are magic is probably better than trying to teach them how and why they're wrong. Because, it's better to have peace than to be right a lot of times. And that was a hard thing to learn. I know a lot of tech support people that burned out really fast or got moved into other positions because they could not learn that lesson. And I noticed that the thing that all of them lacked was humility. And I'm going to say right up front here that me standing here criticizing a bunch of people for lack of humility is inviting criticism. But here we go. So let me just say I am not the most humble person in the world, but I am the second most humble person that I know. That's not true. But humility is important. Jesus demonstrated humility in so many different ways. By washing his disciples' feet, by coming into this world as a defenseless baby, by going to the cross for sins that he didn't commit. In our passage in Romans this morning, Paul wrote this in verse 16. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. In other words, be humble. Have you ever been around somebody who was too proud to be around ordinary people? It's the worst. People who act like they know it all are the worst. But humility doesn't mean putting yourself down. That's a mistake a lot of people make. In an attempt to be humble, they insult themselves and they lower themselves. Humility just means lifting others up higher. The best description I heard was that humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. Think of Jesus and the kind of people he was willing to hang out with. Jesus, the King of Kings, was totally willing to sit down and share a meal with tax collectors. Jesus, the Lord of Lords, didn't have a problem talking to lepers and outcasts. Jesus, the Son of God, was a friend of sinners. If anybody in history had a reason to be puffed up and holier than thou, it was Jesus. But he didn't do that. And that says a lot about what our own posture should be in relation to other people. Or, as the New Jersey-based power pop band Fountains of Wayne would have put it in 1996, sink to the bottom. I'm going to be honest, I had to kind of stretch for this song title. But I love Fountains of Wayne, and it's as close as I could get. By the way, their bass player and primary songwriter died of COVID-19 in April, and I'm still not over it. But that should be our view, from the bottom, looking up, not from the top, looking down. So sink to the bottom if you have to. If you look around at everyone else and notice that you're looking down, you need to change that position. You need to change that posture. Now, lastly, there's one thing that ties all of this together. One thing that allows us to humble ourselves, that allows us to listen when we want to speak, that allows us to change and to copy Jesus instead of copying the world. In Colossians 3:14, Paul writes, "Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds us all together in perfect harmony." In the kids' video you saw this morning, you saw Jen and me pretending to argue about music. We didn't have to pretend. We have been in like 4 different bands together. Over the years, we've lost count. We've been playing music together for almost as long as we've been married. And we are still married. Because love is what allows us to do that. There have been many, many times when Jen got mad at me for not telling her the right key for a song we were about to play. One time it happened right back there on this stage. Was not that long ago. She has also gotten mad at me for not knowing what key I was playing in myself. And this happens mostly with songs that I've written, where she will say something like, "You should really know the key of the song if you wrote the song." And then I don't have a good answer, because she's not wrong. But I listen instead of speaking. But the funniest arguments about music that we get into, at least from my perspective, she might not agree, is when we finish playing a new song together. Usually it'll be a situation where I've written a song, "Hey, let's try this before we bring it to the rest of the band," and I'll play my part, and she'll start working on her bass line, and we get through the song, and she'll turn to me and say, "Was that bass line okay?" Now, understand, in those specific situations, I have been playing my guitar, I have been singing the words, I've been doing 2 things at once, so it's not like I'm just sitting there daydreaming. But it's really hard, while you're doing 2 things at once, to evaluate what someone else is doing. So I will often respond with the most honest answer I can give her. "I didn't notice it, so it must be fine." She doesn't like that answer. She makes that clear. But if the rhythm was off, I would notice, right? If she played a wrong note, I would notice, because we wouldn't be playing in harmony with each other, and that would stick out. That would be jarring. That would be noticeable. When everything fits together so well that you don't really notice the individual parts and pieces on their own, but only the whole product, that's the way things are supposed to be. That's harmony. And in our case, that's love. Or, as one-hit wonder Donna Lewis would have put it in 1996, "I love you always forever." Because love needs to cover everything that we do. We can humble ourselves and raise others up because of love. We can just shut up and listen because of love. We can follow Jesus and not the world because of love. And it is not just our love. It's not just about how we feel about each other. We can only love because Jesus loved us first. We can only love because he showed us what real love is. It's following what God says. It's not following our hearts or worldly wisdom. It's listening and only speaking when it's wise. It's humbling ourselves and thinking more of others and their needs than ourselves and our needs. As we embark on this journey of one another's this morning, I want to give you a challenge. It's really easy to stand up here and say that we should follow God, listen more, humble ourselves, and show love. But how do we do that? I don't mean in a big, global, overarching way. I mean us, right here in this room this morning. How does Real Life Church of God love one another better? What do we need to do? What do we need to change? What do we need to add or take away to love each other better, to live in harmony better? I want to encourage you to think about that. I want you to think about specific actions that we can take as a church and as individuals within the church to love each other better. If you're feeling brave, I would challenge you to post it on the Facebook group so that you can share it and we can talk about it. Because I think that all of us, and that includes me, that includes Brian and Kim, it includes Pastor Tim, everybody, we can do a better job of loving each other. So let's do that. Let's love one another and be the church together in harmony. Let's pray.